This is the long history of how the U.S. government has regulated and ensured that dietary supplement manufacturers maintain the most stringent quality requirements and ensured their products have remained the safest in the world. No, this is not a Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton movie. Dietary supplements are a food commodity regulated not by those guys, but by these guys in dark suits with sunglasses. The feds, the guys who have the power to fine you, jail you, remove products from store shelves, and issue other penalties for breaking federal laws governing dietary supplements. Those are FDA inspectors and federal marshals, and they mean business, whether enforcing drugs, devices. They also enforce laws governing food, and what this video is about, the enforcement of dietary supplement rules. It is an important story because it is often misunderstood, and you hear about the short version occasionally, and it's critical because a majority of Americans use nutritional supplements each day as a part of a balanced approach to promote a healthy lifestyle. The regulation of food products actually started in 1848 with the establishment of U.S. Customs laboratories to administer the Import Drugs Act of 1848. The U.S. became the world's dumping ground for counterfeit, contaminated, diluted, and decomposed drug materials. The law was designed to enforce the purity and potency standard of the U.S. pharmacopoeia. The first reported laboratory testing programs to study adulteration of foods, the U.S. food supply was at a hazard level of 10, despite the new programs in place. Chemical preservatives, toxic colors were rampant, milk was unpasteurized, and ice was the principal means of refrigeration. Opium, morphine, and heroin tonics sold on the street by salesmen and trained carpetbaggers failed to declare any ingredients, and true Wild West show productions toured with sellers peddling patent medicine cure-all products. Consumer advocate Dr. Harvey Wiley, who became known as the father of the Pure Food and Drug Act, set out on a crusade for federal food and drug law reform. Upton Sinclair's novel, The Jungle, depicting unsanitary conditions in the Chicago meatpacking industry, and Dr. Wiley's pursuit to regulate what people ate, drank, or used for medicine culminated in the passage of the 1906 Wiley Act. This was designed to stop food adulteration, quack remedies, and enforce sanitary conditions in food facilities. Wiley selected Walter Campbell as his first chief inspector with powers to seize violative products. Campbell would go on to become the first commissioner of Food and Drugs in 1940 and was the architect of the present Federal Food Drug Cosmetic Act, passed in 1938. 3 decades later, other important health programs to ensure sanitary facilities and safety of the food supply were added to the FDA by transfer from the Public Health Service. Dietary supplement-specific regulations started to roll in the 1970s. The era with mirror balls on the ceilings and teenagers running around with Disco Sucks t-shirts. FDA had long weighed how best to regulate dietary supplement safety, and at first leaned towards regulating them as prescription medicines. FDA took the approach to rid the market of vitamins by claiming on a case-by-case basis they were adulterated based on their potency. So FDA proposed the Vitamin and Mineral Regs in 1966, which declared that future regulations would prohibit the use of dietary supplement sources, whether synthetic or natural. Turns out defining natural was as big a topic back then as it is today. But what if FDA had won this round, and an organization called the National Dietary Foods Association, or NDFA, hadn't stepped in? The consumer would have lost the right to know what substance a dietary supplement was made from. FDA also wanted to ban the use of basic health facts or truthful statements made on behalf of health food supplements, envisioning a world of products with generic labels containing nothing interesting about the ingredients they contained. This public debate took place in what became known as the vitamin hearings of 1973. This proposal was viewed as short-sighted by many, including our organization, which was then called the National Nutritional Foods Association. The FDA commissioner also wanted to set limits on vitamins based solely on the false assumption at the time that it might cause hypervitaminosis. For example, supplements containing greater than 100 international units of vitamin D would be regulated with a heavy hand. As it turns out later, 400 IUs was eventually set as the recommended daily intake level for vitamin D, and some individuals today require more than that. These early restrictions seem silly when we fast forward to today, where over half Americans use at least one dietary supplement containing a vitamin, mineral, botanical substance on a daily basis, along with a healthy diet to promote a healthy lifestyle. All that arguing for 8 years was all for naught because FDA ignored these and other strong objections and finalized the 1966 vitamin and mineral regulation in the fall of 1973. In response, NNFA filed a 183-page brief in protest against the FDA regulations. FDA was just getting started, however, and proposed additional regulations in 1974 that declared vitamin E and zinc unessential nutrients. A few years later, FDA reversed itself and established recommended daily allowances, or RDAs, for both. FDA also tried to limit the potency and number of variety of combinations of ingredients in food supplements. In 1975, NNFA challenged the FDA and FTC's ban on factual statements about natural products, which eventually led to a march on Capitol Hill by retailers, manufacturers, and wholesalers called the Health Freedom Rally. The reason for the rally was simple. American consumers wanted the right to purchase safe health foods and supplements. And on August 15, 1975, a federal court ruled in favor of the consumers, which were represented by NNFA. The ruling allowed the word natural in labeling, which FDA had tried to prevent from being used. FDA's arbitrary limits on potency of supplements with ingredients in excess of 150% of the RDA was also lifted. Non-essential nutrients could be listed on supplement labels for the first time. It was a huge victory for consumers who wanted more information about nutritional supplements. Then, in 1976, Congress passed the Rogers-Proxmire Act, which prohibited FDA from regulating vitamins and minerals as prescription drugs. This was a critical development because supplements are not prescription medicines. They are made up of mostly the same ingredients found in foods and natural substances and are meant to supplement a balanced lifestyle of diet and exercise. 1977 was more of the same for consumers in the industry. Despite the Rogers-Proxmire Act, FDA attempted to again classify high dosages of vitamin A and D as prescription drugs, but NNFA stepped in and sued, and a federal judge rebuked the FDA yet again, saying its actions were arbitrary, capricious, and not in accordance with the law. 1977 was also the same year that Dr. Linus Pauling was the only person to ever win 2 Nobel Prizes on his own, accepted NNFA's Distinguished Service Award for his work in vitamin therapy. You might remember Dr. Pauling as the man behind vitamin C, the one who taught us all that vitamin C during the winter months could make us feel a whole lot better. The FDA opted for a new and different approach and declared supplements to be unapproved food additives. Under the food additives provision of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, no food additive may be sold unless the manufacturer proves it's safe to FDA's satisfaction. The idea here was to make proving the safety of supplements so difficult that it would drive them out of the marketplace for good. The Court of Appeals for the First Circuit described FDA's approach as nonsensical, and the Seventh Circuit described their action as an Alice in Wonderland approach. You might think our story ends here, but here's where the story of how supplements came to be regulated took a major twist. In the late 80s, FDA started using food additive provisions again to go after dietary supplements. FDA didn't understand supplements or the ingredients in supplements and wanted them off store shelves. If an ingredient was a new food additive, a manufacturer needed to petition the agency with a food additive petition or have FDA bless it with GRAS status. No, not the kind of substance that made the 70s legendary with many different names for it. GRAS means generally recognized as safe, but the ingredients in dietary supplements sold at the time were anything but new. They had been around for years, decades, and even hundreds of years, in some cases thousands of years. Industry pled its case to Congress. The era of David Kessler at FDA began, and he began a crusade to declare categories of supplements unsafe and to convince Congress for the need for a more aggressive enforcement action approach. Field agents would go to health food stores across the U.S. posing as customers in the hopes of inducing store clerks into making prohibited disease claims for the supplement products sold in those stores. In the interim, the administration of President Bush, no, not that Bush, the older one, the 1,000 Points of Light guy, worked to enact the Nutritional Labeling and Education Act in 1990. This was designed to improve nutritional information on consumer products, as well as health claims one can make for products. To make a health claim today, you need at least 2 randomized controlled clinical trials to pass the FDA's SSA, or Standard Scientific Agreement, to evaluate the role of one or more ingredients in risk reduction of a disease. In fact, all dietary supplements need to substantiate any of their claims to the Federal Trade Commission with competent, reliable scientific evidence. Usually that means going to a contract research organization and doing human clinical trials. Back to the food additive story. FDA was pulling supplements off shelves in the late 80s and early 90s using their powers from the food additive provisions. It upset a few people because the industry became organized, really organized. They pled with Congress to intervene. People usually think it was only 1 or 2 senators or just a few select people who intervened on behalf of the entire industry. In reality, Congress passed the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act in 1994 with a unanimous vote. That's right, no dissenters to the vote. When is the last time that happened? President Bill Clinton signed the bill into law, saying it was a good step for public health and safety. Many of the co-sponsors of the legislation, like Senator Ted Kennedy, Tom Harkin, and Representatives John Dingell and Henry Waxman, were considered a pantheon of consumer protection at the time. The act took dietary supplements out of the food additive box and created its own regulatory category at FDA because it recognized dietary ingredients were safer than drug ingredients and therefore closer to a food than a drug. Most of the ingredients and supplements at the time were already in commerce, so applying food additive provisions to this new category of food and branding them as unapproved food additives just didn't make any sense. Touche was landmark legislation because for the first time FDA defined the term dietary supplement for this food commodity, as well as the types of ingredients that could or could not be dietary ingredients. Touche also added the new dietary ingredient provision, which requires manufacturers or distributors of a new dietary ingredient, or NDI, to submit a pre-market notification to FDA at least 75 days before introducing the supplement into interstate commerce. The NDI notification to FDA must contain the basis on which the manufacturer or distributor of the NDI has concluded the dietary supplement containing the NDI will reasonably be expected to be safe. If the required pre-market notification is not submitted to FDA, the supplement product containing that NDI is deemed to be adulterated. Touche also addressed claim statements made on dietary supplements that the dietary supplement industry can make. Back in 1994, they were called statements of nutritional support. Today, they are called structure-function claims with the passage of the January 6, 2000 Structure-Function Final Rule. The Structure-Function Final Rule was written exclusively to regulate statements made on dietary supplements. Touche also granted FDA powers to develop manufacturing standards for dietary supplements. GMPs are designed to ensure supplement quality, and they set standards for identity, strength, potency, purity, composition, as well as testing for contaminants like heavy metals. FDA sat on developing cGMPs for years after Congress instructed them to do just that, so the Natural Nutritional Foods Association, today's NPA, stepped in to help develop a model for dietary supplement good manufacturing practices. It was patterned after current GMPs like drug GMPs and served as the basis for FDA's Advanced Notice of Public Rulemaking on the much anticipated dietary supplement GMP rule, but more on that later. In 1997, Congress passed the Food and Drug Modernization Act, which allowed dietary supplements to make health claims so long as companies provided evidence that adhered to FDA's Significant Scientific Agreement, or SSA. That's just another acronym meaning a requirement for the industry to provide 2 randomized controlled clinical trials which substantiate a health claim designed to look at disease risk reduction. 2 randomized controlled clinical trials, or RCTs, is also known as the drug standard. In the years between 1999 and 2001, 2 major developments shaped dietary supplements. First, a case, Pearson v. Shalala, forced the FDA to allow qualified health claims on dietary supplement products. These are different than health claims. An example would be consumption of phosphatidylserine may reduce the risk of cognitive dysfunction in the elderly. Very limited and preliminary scientific evidence suggests that phosphatidylserine may reduce the risk of cognitive dysfunction in the elderly, but FDA concludes that there is little scientific evidence supporting this claim. In other words, qualified health claims were allowed when there was some scientific information available, but not enough information to pass the 2 RCT rule per FDA's SSA for health claims. Second, this period saw revisions to the food labeling regulations, which required dietary supplements to present nutrition information in a box with the title Supplement Facts. We've already discussed the Structure-Function Final Rule in 2000. That essentially prevented all companies from making claims to cure, treat, prevent, or mitigate disease on their product. The FDA enforces very aggressively any company making disease claims on products and regulates them as unapproved new drugs. 2002 ushered in the Bioterrorism Act, which forced all food facilities, including dietary supplement companies, to register with the FDA. Remember I told you we'd get back to GMPs? Well, better late than never, 2003 was the year that FDA published a proposed reg to require good manufacturing practices for the dietary supplement industry. In 2007, the FDA promulgated a final rule on dietary supplement good manufacturing practices, an 813-page playbook of rules to abide by for the industry in making products. The first warning letter adherent to those final rules for not meeting GMP was in March of 2010. Dietary supplement GMPs are no laughing matter. They've even caused some companies to switch from being a supplement to being labeled as a conventional food because it is such a high burden to get around. Today, FDA roughly inspects approximately 600 firms annually. They've issued over 900 warning letters and have led agency actions like injunctions and seizures. FDA enforced so vigorously on supplements between 2011 and 2014 that the supplement group led the way on injunctions across all FDA groups. The bottom line is FDA does indeed regulate supplements. 2004 was the year the Food Allergen Labeling Consumer Protection Act, or FALSPA, established allergen labeling for packaged foods. It basically said if a product contains one of the 8 major food allergens, consumers must be informed of that fact. 2006 also brought the Dietary Supplement Non-Prescription Drug Consumer Act, or the AER bill. The Serious Adverse Event Reporting Bill required supplement manufacturers to report their serious adverse events to FDA and keep written records of all their serious adverse events reported to them by consumers. Today, dietary supplements are the only commodity of food to have a mandatory requirement for serious adverse event reporting. Fish, meat, and produce companies, they don't have to do that. 2011 brought the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA. That piece of legislation addressed problems in the supply chain predominantly from foreign overseas suppliers. While FDA's preventive control rules for dietary ingredients contained in supplements are still being worked through, you will certainly hear about those ingredient companies being inspected very soon. Long story short, dietary supplements are indeed regulated. While it has been quite a roller coaster of a ride, we don't want to forget the battles vitamins and supplements fought along the way. We don't want to forget how the battles with FDA shaped science and nutrition and ushered in important things that are part of our everyday lives, like RDA's, recommended daily allowances. While we've come a long way since the days of single ingredient vitamins, days where ingredient combinations were renegade and forbidden by FDA, that certainly would have given us a lot more pills to choke down had we not evolved from that regulatory state of infancy. The dietary supplement industry has really strict regulations, much more so than conventional foods, and when regulations just don't plain make sense, NPA will continue to fight and advocate for the industry once more. Thank you.